Good evening from Rocky Mountain PBS. I'm Cynthia Hessen. This is Colorado State of Mind. Tonight, in our series of programs on the next Colorado congressional delegation, we come to District 7, one of the metro area districts where the population is almost 98% urban. That density is contained in a relatively small area. The 7th district is on the east side of the pink area you see here, and it includes Lakewood, Arvada, Aurora, and part of rural Adams County. After redistricting, the change in District 7 is not completely perceptible on the map, but the 614,000 people represented there, more than a third were previously in District 2. Democratic Congressman Ed Perlmutter has held the seat for the past 6 years, winning re-election twice before. He's a lifelong resident of Jefferson County and an attorney. This year, businessman Joe Coors is the Republican challenging Perlmutter. He retired as CEO of Coors Tech, the company previously known as Coors Porcelain. Well, every race this year is about the economy. Let's talk first about the fiscal cliff that Congress is headed to, a combination of tax hikes and huge across-the-board spending cuts, which will take effect in January unless some kind of compromise is reached. The tax implications of this on the middle class are stark. A family with earnings in the $110,000 to $140,000 range will see an increase in their tax bill of about $6,000. Mr. Coors, even if you would win, you would not be in place before any deals that might be made by the end of the year. But if you will, please talk about the specific compromises you'd be willing to make and you would like to see made to avoid this fiscal cliff.
Thank you, Cynthia. First, to start off with, as I walk around the district and talk to small businesses, they are absolutely scared to death of what's going to happen on January 1st if something isn't done. And if the current rates are allowed to expire, 1 million small business owners will be faced with an incredible tax increase. And it's estimated by Ernst & Young and by the National Federation of Independent Businesses that up to 700,000 to 1.5 million jobs would be lost as a result of this, because who's going to pay for the extra taxes that fall upon the 1 million voters, 1 million owners. So my idea of a compromise would be to indefinitely extend the current tax rates. Nobody gets hurt in a deal like that, and everybody wins. To me, it's kind of a win-win deal, and I'd be willing to compromise back to 5 years if that would be necessary. And gee, I think even given 5 years that Congress might be able to do something.
Part of the reason Congress put this in place, this cliff, was because there is certainly feeling that the Bush tax cuts should not be continued. You are going to be involved in the fray on this, Congressman. What do you see? Is it possible to leave things just as they are?
Well, I think we got to understand how we got here. And so at the end of the Clinton administration, we had a surplus. Revenues exceeded expenses. And then under George Bush, we had 2 major tax cuts. That cost the country about $2 trillion. We had 2 wars that we paid for, or didn't pay for. They're on a credit card. That's a couple $1 trillion. And then a deregulated Wall Street that ran amok, and that's cost the country in all sorts of ways, but about $3.5 trillion. So about half of the nation's debt comes from those 3 things. It doesn't come from NIH grants, it doesn't come from education, doesn't come from transportation, and it doesn't come from PBS or Big Bird and Sesame Street. So, but what we face is a major debt that we have to figure out how to pay. And I'm part of a bipartisan group, Democrats and Republicans, that has come up with a Simpson-Bowles-like budget that recognizes that every ledger, for businesses and families and the nation, you've got to have revenue and expense. So you need to have revenue and manage expenses in this particular instance so that we can, in a business-like way, over a 10-year period, reduce the nation's debt. And so I believe and I hope that after this election, there will be, in the lame duck period, a bipartisan group, both in the Senate and the House, that will get together and come up with something like Simpson-Bowles, which doesn't take us off a fiscal cliff on January 1st, but provides us with a bipartisan 10-year business plan that reduces the nation's deficit by $4 trillion.
I think that group you're referring to that you're part of now is 38 people. It would have to grow.
Yeah, we call it, we're called the Brave 38 by USA Today, and the Post. We've got to do this in a bipartisan fashion. If we don't work together, Democrats and Republicans, we won't get this done. And there is a lot at stake, and you mentioned it in your opening.
The Simpson-Bowles Commission, of course, was the commission on the deficit, which had bipartisan people running it and bipartisan support, although it never came before the Congress. Are you in favor of Simpson-Bowles, the things that it calls for to settle this problem?
No, but I would,
None of it?
I would like to, there's some things, but I would like to point out that Simpson-Bowles was not adopted by even the President of the United States, was not adopted by the Senate, and the Brave 38 were left holding the bag. The biggest reason I'm not in favor of Simpson-Bowles is because it embraces Obamacare, and I think Obamacare is a horrible disaster financially to this country.
Well, and I'd like to respond. I think one of the main reason that Joe doesn't embrace the Simpson-Bowles like thing is because it recognizes we need additional revenue in this country, not just cutting different programs, whether it's Big Bird and Sesame Street or some transportation projects or those kinds of things. You have to have both sides of the ledger. You have to look at both things, the revenue and the expense, if we really want to make a dent in our debt. And it's just wishful thinking on his part to say, let's just keep these tax cuts that generally benefit the wealthiest people in the country and just keep those going forever, and let's just start cutting things, because that's not we need the services that we have, whether it's fire grants or education, building schools, transportation, those kinds of things. So I think we need a business-like plan that takes us out 10 years, that really takes us away from the fiscal cliff and does this in a moderated sort of way where nothing is sacred. Everything's on the table, both on the revenue side as well as the expense side.
Is there a formula in your mind for how much $3 in spending cuts and $1 in revenue, something like that will put us on a right path? Well,
for me, it's let's see how the deals develop. But I think it's probably, I think Simpson-Bowles was for every dollar in revenue, it was $2.50 to $3 in expense cuts. And looking at all kinds of things, from defense to health care to Interior Department. So everything is on the table. And I think that's how we've got to look at this. Even though most of those things didn't create this major debt that the country's incurred over the last 10 years, we are where we are, and we just have to get busy and get on it.
So do you disagree about the fact that more revenue is going to be necessary to straighten this out?
I don't disagree with the revenue. It's probably the source of the revenue. The United States is the strongest economic power in the world because of small businesses. And the backbone of this country is small businesses operating in a free enterprise environment. If we can get the government out of the way, put certainty back into taxes, we will accomplish something that hasn't been accomplished for the last 4 years, that gives the small business sector of the United States some going ahead ammunition, if you will, to really ignite this country's economy.
Why do you think that small business has not performed in terms of job creation for the past 4 years? Is it strictly the recession?
Well, we had a major recession, something that we haven't faced since the 30s. And so those companies are beginning to grow now. We're beginning to see unemployment drop. Recently we heard that unemployment has dropped to 7.8%, and so we are making inroads, and small businesses are starting up. We see in Colorado construction is up. We see home prices are coming back up. So we're on the right track, and small businesses will start forming and continue to form, and will really put a lot of people back to work. And that's my goal too. I think we both share that same goal. But at the same time, we don't want to go off this fiscal cliff, and we need to have a reasonable business plan that understands that it's both revenue and expense. You can't just cut your way out of this situation.
Since you brought up Obamacare, last week in the first presidential debate, Mitt Romney talked about Obamacare as well, but there are certainly plenty of parts of it that he seems to embrace. Is it necessary to repeal the whole thing? Don't you lose a lot that you have to put back in place?
Well, let me start with Obamacare in its entirety. As I said, it's going to add $1.7 trillion to the cost of government over the next 10 years. It creates 158 new agencies and programs. It creates an independent practices advisory board, which basically is going to tell everybody what they can do and what kind of services they can get. And those things I think are just wrong. Now, the parts that I would extend, and my own platform would be, I call it TIP. We need tort reform because malpractice insurance is the single biggest cost for private practice, healthcare private practice. We need interstate competition. We need portability. You ought to be able to take one plan with you wherever you go, and then we need to protect the pre-existing conditions.
Congressman, let me ask you to react to all of that.
Well, those 3 points that he just brought up are already in Obamacare. Certainly there's a pilot project on tort reform. There is the opportunity to take things across interstate lines or cross lines. But really the purpose and the main reason I support the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, is one, it does away with discrimination against people who have prior illnesses or prior health conditions or from injuries or the like. And that is something that is huge, so that an insurance company can't deny you because you've been sick before. And that is a huge step forward in terms of civil rights for this country. Secondly, it allows young people to stay on their parents' policies until they're 26. And coming through a fragile economy, that's been very important for lots and lots of families, a couple million families across the country. It helps close the donut hole that George Bush created in his Medicare approach. So it helps close that donut hole. And one of the most important things is it expands women's health choices. And so I think I'd like to see Obamacare maintained. There are always ways to refine and improve anything.
Can you give me just one example? What's something that you would change or refine, as you say?
Well, one of the things that we already worked on was there was a additional charge to small businesses over $600, and we modified that early on so that the whole bill would be improved. I think we want to take a look at some of the delivery services, because really what this is all about is the cost of health care generally. And so part of what we want to do is just make sure that administrative costs are reasonable across the board, and that we want to continue to do that through the Affordable Care Act.
May I add one thing?
Sure, one more, and then we'll go to something else.
Okay, and that is that Obamacare takes $716 billion out of Medicare and puts it into Obamacare, leaving seniors with less than they've been promised, and we need to protect the benefits.
This is a figure everyone knows is out there.
We need to set the record straight on that one. The $716 billion of savings is over a 10-year period, and that savings is placed back into the Medicare system so that the Medicare system is prolonged. And so there aren't any benefits cut. There's nothing like that. And so when Joe says that, it's just in error.
All right, I know we could go on and on with that in terms of what President Obama and Mitt Romney have said about it as well, but let me switch to something that we aren't seeing talked about everywhere in congressional races, and that is gun violence. Our own experience in July with the Aurora Theater shootings, and then several subsequent mass shootings in Wisconsin and Minnesota and elsewhere. There really is cry out there on the part of some people saying Congress should do more than offer condolences. It should be making some actual changes in how and what people can access in this country. What is it that you would get behind, want to get behind on that way?
Well, July 20th was a very sad day for our country and certainly for our city and the metropolitan area. Aurora will never be the same after that mass killing. And I've had a chance to meet with the families of some of those who were killed. I've met with others who've been wounded. I've met with the medical teams and law enforcement. And, you know, for me, this has become a very personal issue. And so on one side of the district you have Columbine, where we had a terrible tragedy 13 or so years ago, and then a couple months ago, 3 months ago, in the Aurora side. So for me, the subject of crime control, public health coming from these mass shootings is something that we just have to deal with. And there are common sense approaches that can be taken to avoid some of these mass killings. And
banning assault weapons?
Well, you look at the old assault weapon act that expired a couple years ago. That needs to be reviewed. Two that I'm part of now. One is to require, so right now if you want to buy a firearm, you have to buy it from a licensed firearm dealer, face-to-face. But you can buy ammunition over the internet or through mail order. So one bill that I'm co-sponsoring requires that you have to buy ammunition from a licensed firearm dealer. You have to do it face-to-face. Another is the weapons that this guy Holmes had extended magazines, had 100-round drum on his assault rifle, extended magazines on handguns. And so another bill is to reduce and not have these extended magazines, because it allows it to just become like a submachine gun, or, you know, rapidly get off lots of rounds of ammunition. And so, you know, somebody who wants to defend their person or wants to hunt doesn't need these 100-round magazines.
All right, and so that is exactly what I was about to say to you, that certainly in these mass shooting cases, they may be individual cases, but without the kind of ammunition and certain weapons that were available, they might not have happened. You support, if I understand correctly, no changes?
No changes. We need to enforce the laws that are already on the books a little bit better. But I go back, I can't imagine the grief of the people, all the people who were affected by this incredible, heinous act by a madman. I also believe that you can't do anything to ban enough, to create enough laws to keep criminals from getting the weapons they do to carry out these heinous deeds.
Does it make sense, though, to not be able to purchase something online without a face-to-face contact? Could you get behind that you have to buy your weapon and your ammunition from a licensed dealer?
I support what Governor Hickenlooper said. There are not enough laws that can be created to keep people from doing whatever it is they want to do. If they want to get things illegally, they'll get them illegally.
I think one place where Joe and I could agree, he mentioned sort of the mental health aspect of this, and that's something I think that we need to continue to investigate, to make sure that people who do have weapons really are of sound mind. And so I think that's the place where there would be some common ground.
And is that part of one of your...
We certainly are looking at different kinds of mental health approaches to who has weapons and the like. So, and making sure that if somebody has mental health issues, that information is available to dealers so that they know who's buying ammunition or guns from them.
In the few minutes that we have left, I want to get a comment from each of you on the ads that you are running, in which each of you have called the other's ad dishonest or baseless. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Coors. Could you quickly describe this ad that you have, which tries to connect Congressman Perlmutter to Solyndra? How does it go, and what's it supposed to accomplish?
Well, Solyndra, as you know, has been a horrible example of government picking winners and losers at the expense of taxpayers. But let's start from the beginning. Congressman Perlmutter, then Congressman-elect, did go to Washington, D.C. His then wife was a lobbyist for Solyndra, who got paid $140,000.
But by the time that happened, she was no longer married to Congressman Perlmutter.
Congressman Perlmutter made a very clear public promise It's documented in the Denver Post that he would not allow his wife or to lobby either his office or the U.S. House of Representatives, and within 3 months that promise was broken.
Will you give us your reaction to that criticism?
Yes, I will.
You have one that came in the newspaper.
Right. And what I have here is the editorial response by the Denver Post to Joe's ads. And, you know, it's a shame our families have known each other for a long time. But this ad was over the top, and the Denver Post describes it as despicable, deceitful, and desperate. And it's a shame that they're running that ad, and as the Post said, he should be embarrassed.
The Coors campaign is also attacking the one you're running, in which you're implying that there was a great deal of outsourcing of jobs from Coors, and there is a Korean man who is a star in the ad who is actually a longtime employee here in District 7. What are you trying to accomplish there?
Well, what occurred is Coors Tech outsourced jobs to Korea, to South Korea, and also to Mexico. And, you know, I believe we want to be making things here in America, not outsourcing jobs. We want to employ folks here in our country and not elsewhere. And so the picture is one that came from the Coors Tech website about their facility in South Korea. And, you know, there has been, you know that Joe has complained about it, but, you know, just from their own investor statements, you know, our facility in Korea, quote, allows us to manufacture low-cost product in Asia for our U.S. customers. Or, in order to enhance profits, the company is transferring certain labor-intensive high-volume component manufacturing to Sonora, Mexico. And then finally, his brother says, we are extremely pleased with our record third quarter. We are benefiting from the outsourcing trend. So these are statements that are being made to his investors, and I believe that if we make things here in America, we will make it in America, and we should be encouraging things like the production tax credit, the wind energy production tax credit, which then brings manufacturers like Vestas to America and to our area.
Short answer, can you tell me why you object to these statements that are made in the ad?
Congressman doesn't understand what it takes to run a business globally. I can sit here and tell you face to face that absolutely no jobs were lost in America because of our decision to open up an operation in South Korea in order to serve the markets in Asia. In international global business, you have to be there sometimes at the request of the customers in order to serve those customers. But absolutely no jobs, and he accuses us of outsourcing jobs. No jobs were lost as a result of this decision to expand in South Korea.
I wish we could go on, but we have come to the time when I want to give each of you a chance to wrap this up with a statement as you would like to make. Congressman, will you begin?
Yes. You know, I've now served in this position for 6 years, and I've grown up in Jefferson County, this Denver area, and what you learn is that if you listen, you're accessible, and you work together with others, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, you can get a lot of things done. Whether it's getting the new VA hospital under construction, which is the biggest construction project in Colorado, or helping expand the National Renewable Energy Lab so that it can continue its mission of finding new ways to power our nation, you can get a lot of things done. And I'm proud that the Denver Post has called me the most bipartisan, most centrist member of the Colorado delegation, and I think that I can continue to get things done for the people of the 7th Congressional District. My name is Ed Perlmutter. I'm running for election, and I ask for your vote.
Mr. Coors, a closing statement from you.
Well, it's been a new adventure for me, and I'm honored to take on this assignment, and I've gotten an awful lot of support. I take exception to his moderacy, because most everything that he approved back in Washington, D.C. was a rubber stamp of either the Obama administration or Nancy Pelosi. I don't intend to be a problem creator back in Washington, D.C. I tend to be a problem solver. I'm a proven job creator, and I can bring some hope to 23 million people in this country who are either underemployed or out of work.
Thank you very much, both of you. That is Colorado State of Mind for this week. We thank the two major party candidates for their discussion tonight, Congressman Ed Perlmutter, the Democrat, and Joe Coors, the Republican. There are two more choices in this District 7 race, Doug Campbell from the American Constitution Party and Libertarian Buck Bailey. We're building an online library of conversations with the third party and independent candidates. You can find those by going to rmpbs.org/panorama and then look for the Colorado State of Mind congressional page. Next week at this time, Congresswoman Diana DeGette and Republican challenger Denny Stroud, who will be here to talk about their contest for District 1. Thank you for watching this edition. I'm Cynthia Hessen. Good night.